We're going to start off and do a quick walkthrough and demo of FIDO secure device onboarding using Volteo Edge's application built on top of the ServiceNow platform and Volteo Edge's cloud components that run all of the FIDO components. So first, just a quick walkthrough of what FIDO is. All right, I'm not going to spend too long on the basics of FIDO. You can go look up the initiative and the specification online. But fundamentally, it allows device manufacturers to use a single SKU that can be targeted at multiple customers with the goals of installing multiple different software stacks. And the device manufacturer only has to install the initial keys related to the final device recipient. And then once that device is shipped to that recipient and is brought online, it will automatically bind to their target cloud and then deploy all the necessary software to that device at that time. So it's late binding provisioning. And in FIDO, there are 4 major software components to think about. So fundamentally, there's the IoT device or the computer device that is going to be onboarded. And this is not specific to any manufacturer or processor architecture. There's a manufacturing tool. This is the tool the manufacturer uses to put down the keys onto that device during the manufacturing process. There is a rendezvous server, which is sort of a DNS type function for all devices that are going to be onboarded at a later time. And there is the FIDO ownership server, which is where the device will finally connect and be provisioned by the owner. In addition, there's a reseller tool. If this product is to flow through a reseller, then there's a tool the reseller uses to validate and then re-sign the vouchers on the way to the final recipient. So here's a much more detailed model. I'm going to walk through the basics of what goes on behind the scenes. To start with, in this case, we're showing a full manufacturer with a reseller and a final customer. And when any of this starts, there needs to be agreements in place that indicate, who's involved in the transaction. So in this case, starting at number 1 here, we have an agreement between the reseller and the manufacturer, and this involves an agreement on with some key exchange and an agreement of what rendezvous servers will be used later in the process. Then the manufacturer needs to take in serial numbers and procurement order numbers so that they're clear which devices are targeted at which reseller or end customer. And then number 3, as the hardware flows to the last part of the manufacturing process, the manufacturer tool installs a restricted operating environment, which is kind of a micro OS, and some keys down to this device so it can be authenticated later. And at that time, vouchers are created. And so then those vouchers are sent to the recipient, in this case, the reseller. Simultaneously, the hardware is shipped. So then the reseller will have the hardware and the vouchers. When a final customer order is placed, prior to that, an agreement will be had between the final customer and the reseller. And similarly, that involves key exchange so that the vouchers can be signed with the end customer in mind. So after the order is sent, the reseller will re-sign those vouchers. No need to touch the actual devices, but it will take the vouchers tied to those particular systems. It'll re-sign them to be passed on down the supply chain to the customer. Those re-signed vouchers are then sent to the end customer, and simultaneously the hardware is shipped. And so when that hardware is received, the staff inside that customer will need to decide what they want provisioned on those. So in our case, we'll use our tool to go in to identify the vouchers which are tied to those particular pieces of hardware. and we'll choose when we want to onboard them and what we want provisioned on those boxes. And then next, those devices can just be plugged into the network anywhere. They will contact the rendezvous server, find their way to the ownership server, and use the FDO secure channel to onboard all of the configuration that's required by that specification. And they'll notify our application that the onboarding is complete, and that device will be entered into the normal asset and configuration management database so that all of the normal management and monitoring processes can continue on through the life cycle. So I'm going to switch over to a demo. So first I'll give a quick walkthrough of sort of the pieces that I just mentioned. This is so I've got my customer hat on now. So there's a place to manage your FDO properties. This is just how your ServiceNow environment interacts with the FDO components. There's a specification of which rendezvous servers that you intend to use for which manufacturer. And this is just part of that agreement so that those devices get provisioned correctly. And then finally, there are configuration agreements. And so these are the agreements you have with different manufacturers. And really, this is about the key exchange so that they get provisioned with you securely in your supply chain. And we can even look at one of these, which just says, hey, there's a public key. And this is publicly available, so any manufacturer can download your public key and sign those vouchers to be sent to you when you make an order. And then finally, we'll have visibility into all the FDO vouchers that we've received and if we've used them for an onboarding or not. You can manage the profiles. So these are the profiles of what's actually going to get provisioned down onto those boxes. I'll look at a really simple one here that is just a script which will install an OS and then install some containers and run an Nginx component. And so with that, those are the items that you'll configure in your system prior to going through any actual FDO transactions. And so with that, let's flip over and go through what happens when you order some devices. So let's say we've ordered some devices. I'm going to put on my manufacturer hat. This represents the manufacturer tool. In this case, I'm not actually provisioning a stack of devices, but I'm going to use virtual devices. And I'm going to just initialize one. So this is going to run all the code to put keys down on a box and generate the vouchers for that customer. And what I'm going to get out of there is the serial number of the device that I've configured. And in the back end, it's going to generate those vouchers, and it's automatically going to send them through the web service over to that customer so that they have them available. So that's done. I can see I generated one of those. It's a serial number starting here with FB ending in 21. And so now I'm going to put on my customer hat and go over there and take a look at that. So I'm going to go look at the vouchers. You can see here's a new voucher that's been sent to me. So I will have gotten this immediately from the manufacturer. Now I'll be waiting for those devices to arrive physically. But I can go ahead and plan for their onboarding. And so for that, I'll just use a new onboarding request. So I'll say what profile, which is what do I want to put on this box? What do I want to provision? In this case, I'll just do the Nginx we discussed. What type of device? So in this case, it's what I'm going to explain what type of asset I'm actually receiving. In this case, I'll use a Dell 5200 gateway, and I'll tell it what type of asset it is. This is so you can have various non-computer based or not generic computers if you want. And then you can give it a time window when you want to accept this device to onboard. So we can limit the time frame when we'll respond and onboard in case for extra security. So we'll go from today to tomorrow. And then here is that voucher that we just received. So in this case, I'm just going to do one at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and submit. So this just submits a request to the system that says, hey, when this device gets onboarded, please deploy this profile and monitor its status And as mentioned, when it does come on board and everything's provisioned, put it into the CMDB so it's fully managed. So I'm just going to refresh this here. You can see that my request is here. It's in a registered status and it's waiting for that device to arrive. So, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to use this manufacturer, just in this case, to start those devices. This part is a simulation, but this is actually reaching into those virtual devices and connecting them to the network. So when I start this, it will turn on that VM and connect it to the network, the same as if I'd received it in a box here by my desk and plugged it into the network. And when that happens, everything else goes on behind the scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and start that device. So I'm going to pop back over to my customer image. So that means, well, it went pretty quick. You can see it's changed to in progress. And so now it's going through the process of notifying the rendezvous server, downloading and running those, provisioning those bits, and you can see that it's switched over to completed now. And if I refresh this, you can see that it's completed. So now that device, additionally, I can look into the asset or the CMDB, the CI database, and I can get all the information about that. So how we onboarded it, the asset information with the serial number that came from the manufacturer, which a configuration item that was created for it to be managed through its operational life cycle. And we additionally have all of the history. So we've got the onboarding details, which is who requested it for onboarding and when, and I can click in and see the history of that and additional the vouchers that were supplied from the manufacturer that let us onboard it. So we've got a history of how this was brought on board. And from there, the rest of its life cycle takes over.